Hello, hi. So this video today is going to be about Pygmalion and class and how the class system is viewed today, not necessarily in America, but just in contemporary culture, and how it's seen in pop culture as well, primarily in the Harry Potter series. So class is a very big part of Pygmalion. It's not a play about linguistics at all, really. I mean, yes, one of the major plot movements is about linguistics, but it's linguistics is a catalyst for a class in this play. And so what you see in the relationship between Henry Higgins and Eliza Doolittle, or Colonel Pickering and Eliza, or Colonel Pickering and Higgins, is a battle of the classes, really. And so Higgins' disregard to Eliza, in the way that I've discussed in my paper and how I've discussed in class, how he's constantly demeaning towards her and treating her like an animal, or calling her like names of an animal and treating her as a servant, and things like that are really indicative of her class at the time, because really Henry Higgins is doing her a very big favor. A woman of her class status and educational level would not get anywhere in that society without a man like Henry Higgins either to teach her or marry her, and that's just how things were. So Henry Higgins' disregard towards Eliza is very indicative, and then you have Eliza's relationship with Colonel Pickering, where at times Colonel Pickering seems to be very, I don't want to use the term disregard because Henry Higgins has a clear disregard of Eliza, but I think a lot of times with Colonel Pickering it's a pity thing. Colonel Pickering really pities this girl, and he doesn't really know why. I mean, he's an older member of the society, and he sees how they treat women, and I suppose he doesn't think that's very fair. But really, he's a fairly well-to-do man, and he really doesn't have to care about this girl. But there's a part of him that does, and I'm still trying to figure out whether that's just sheer pity, or if he feels he has to do that in this society. I'm really not sure. But again, indicative of class. And at the end of the play, Eliza attributes her newfound self-respect to Colonel Pickering and not to Henry Higgins. She gives all of the credit to Henry Higgins for her new dialect, definitely, but she holds no respect for Henry Higgins as a man, whereas she holds Colonel Pickering in very high regard because of the way he treated her with respect from the beginning. She says, "It's because of you, the fact that you called me Miss Doolittle, that gave me the self-respect that I have to go out and get a job and marry Freddie." And it's very it's very indicative of what class interaction would have been at the time. I think Henry Higgins would have been what was usual, and Colonel Pickering would have been unusual, yes, but when it did happen, it was very fortunate for those that it did happen to. So where I want to take this now is the class system in contemporary culture still survives. There is still a remnant of it, but I think it's prevalent in different ways. And so I want to talk about traditional class systems in popular literature before I talk about class systems in the world today. And so I want to talk about class systems in the Harry Potter series. It's something that's definitely talked about in all 7 books. You constantly have reference to purebloods and half-bloods and muggleborns, who are derogatively called mudbloods, and that's an issue. That is what the class system sort of would have been like. In the time of Pygmalion, you would have had that supreme aristocratic view of the high class, and that would be found with the purebloods. You would want to marry other aristocracy. You would want to marry other purebloods. You would want to keep the family line as clean as possible. With half-bloods, you have that intermarriage. You have that leaving your class a little. You have some sort of fraternization, which maybe wouldn't have been so acceptable at the time, but people did it anyway. And then you have the muggleborns, who are just the lowest of the low in the eyes in the purebloods, and I mean that would have been the same thing at that time in terms of class. With Pygmalion, you have the low class, and they are not viewed pleasantly by the upper class or the aristocracy. I mean, you see it with Eliza and Clara. Clara, in the beginning of the play, has no regard for Eliza, despite the fact that she is out of money, despite the fact that they are not well-to-do. They still have a good name to fall back on, whereas Eliza has nothing. And you see that in the Harry Potter series as well. Not necessarily the no money aspect of things, but you definitely have a pureblood who has disregard for other purebloods. Purebloods who have no money. You have a pureblood who has no respect for a half-blood, and you have a pureblood who has no respect for a Muggle-born. And this is most popularly seen with Draco Malfoy in his regard to Ron Weasley, Harry Potter, and Hermione Granger, respectively. And so that brings me back to how culture is today. You still have some class systems similar to this today. I mean, in India they have a very prevalent class system. They call it a caste system, which is different than the class system. I should make that clear. But it's the most prevalent type of class system that we have today. So there's 4 different castes, and the highest class is the most well-to-do, and the lowest class is the most caste is the most least-to-do. And I mean, the higher caste you are, the better off you are, as I just said. But the higher caste you are, the closer you are to reaching nirvana, if you're a Buddhist, or if you're just Indian, to reaching to that place where you don't have to be reincarnated once again. But I mean, the class system really in America, it still exists, but not nearly in the same way that it did 100 years ago. I mean, really, it seems to have disappeared after the sinking of the Titanic. It really just disappeared. We became very disenfranchised with it, and that was probably for the best for this country. But I mean, the class system is still prevalent in Britain. Not nearly as much as it was 100 years ago, but it definitely is still prevalent. But really, I think in most societies you have a class system that's not dependent on where you're born or how much money you're born into or anything like that. I really think you have classes developing later on that are more culture-based because of the societies that we live in. And so really what I'm referring to is this sort of class system as in like first class and second class citizens, as opposed to high, middle, and low class. And so in the 1940s, Germany created a first class and second class citizen situation, and we bred the Holocaust from that, and that was ugly, to say the least. In the 1960s, America, I mean, prior to the 1960s, but very prevalent in the 1960s, we have the civil rights movement, and you have a first class and second class citizen deal going on again. You have white supremacy, and you have the civil rights movement. You have people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King coming up to the forefront and speaking up for black rights, and eventually the leaders, John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, step up to the plate and really put some emphasis on it. And so you have the reduction of that. And really the main thing we have today going on is a first class, second class system between the people in power and between some of the citizens who are gay or lesbian. And that's a really big problem in America today, and that's really where the class system is now. And so how we have laws from 100 years ago that help the low class, and how we have laws from 80 years ago, almost 80 years ago, to help Jewish people and minorities, and 60 years ago to help blacks. I think it's very important that we get some laws to help gay and lesbians, because this is our class system now and we really have to strive for equality. And that's about the state of things. And this is my reflection video for British Literature 2, Survey of British Literature. And this is what I think about what Pygmalion can teach us and where we stand in society today. I think Pygmalion teaches us how to treat people. You got to treat people with some respect, and I think we see that with Pickering and Eliza, not so much with Higgins and Eliza. And I think how you act toward people says a lot about you, and that's part of the allure of the evolution of Eliza's character. She comes from a very low place, and she evolves with some education, and she really puts herself on a whole new level with the help of Higgins and Pickering, but it's really Pickering's reaction toward her and treatment of her that aids this the most.